Hey everyone, today's story is not just about one man. It's about how dreams turned into hatred, how a nation followed, and how the world paid the price. This is the true and emotional journey of Adolf Hitler, from a quiet boy who loved to draw to a dictator who brought the world to war. It's a story of pain, power, and a dark chapter in history we must never forget. Stay with me, because this isn't just history. It's a story that will make you think, feel, and never forget. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small town called Braunau am Inn, near the border of Germany and Austria. His father, Alois Hitler, worked as a customs officer, a government job that required order and obedience. He was a very strict man who expected his children to follow rules and be disciplined. He believed success came from structure and hard work, and he wanted young Adolf to follow in his footsteps and work for the government too. But Hitler was different. He wasn't very interested in school. He often clashed with his teachers and argued with classmates. Instead of doing math or science, he spent hours drawing buildings, castles, and imaginary cities. He would dream about becoming a great artist or architect. His mother, Clara, was kind and gentle. She saw his passion for art and supported his dreams, even though she was often tired and sick. She was the only person he truly felt close to Adolf. She was not just a mother. She was a safe place in a world that often seemed hard. When Adolf was 14, something happened that changed his life forever. His father died suddenly of a lung condition. Adolf felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Without his father's pressure, he thought he might now have the freedom to follow his heart and become an artist. A few years later, a much deeper pain struck. In 1907, Adolf's mother became very ill with breast cancer. Day by day, she became weaker. Adolf stayed by her side as much as he could. He watched her suffer, and it broke his heart. That same year, she passed away. Adolf was only 18, and now he was completely alone in the world. Her death affected him deeply. He later said it was the greatest loss he ever experienced. With no one left to guide him, he moved to Vienna, the capital of Austria, hoping to start his life as an artist. But things did not go as planned. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, one of the best schools for artists. He was very hopeful, but the judges said his drawings were not good enough, especially the ones with people in them. They rejected him. He tried again the next year and failed again. These rejections crushed him. He believed he had real talent. He didn't understand why they didn't accept him. Instead of accepting his weaknesses, he blamed others. He started to think the world was unfair. He began blaming groups of people, especially Jewish people, for his failures. He did not know them personally, but he began to believe hateful things he read or heard from others. Adolf started living in cheap hostels and shelters. He had no real job. He sold small paintings and postcards just to buy food. Winters were cold. He was hungry and angry, not just at the world, but at himself. He once had a mother who believed in him, but now he felt invisible, like a failure. This was where his hatred started to grow, not in power, but in pain. In 1914, the world changed. A great war, what we now call World War I, began in Europe. It was a time of fear, confusion, and rising tensions between powerful countries. For many young men like Adolf Hitler, the war felt like a new beginning, a chance to find meaning and purpose. Adolf had been living in Vienna, jobless and frustrated, He was still angry about his failures as an artist and about how hard life had become. So, when Germany joined the war, he saw an opportunity. Although he was still an Austrian citizen, he traveled to Munich in Germany and joined the German army. He finally had a uniform, a title, and a cause. In the military, he wasn't just a lonely young man anymore. He was a soldier. He served as a messenger, running across battlefields, carrying messages between officers. This was a very dangerous job. Bombs fell all around him. Guns roared in every direction. Death was always close. But Hitler was brave. He followed orders and did his job well. In the mud and terror of the trenches, he found something he hadn't felt before: belonging. The army gave him food, order, and a sense of pride. His commanders noticed him. He received medals for his bravery, including the Iron Cross, one of Germany's highest honors. Yet, the war itself was terrible. Millions of young men died. Entire villages were destroyed. Gas attacks, trench warfare, and endless battles broke the spirits of many soldiers. Hitler was wounded twice, once by a shell explosion and once by a gas attack that temporarily blinded him. When he was in the hospital, recovering from the gas attack in 1918, the news came. Germany had lost the war. The government had signed a treaty and surrendered. For Adolf, this was the greatest betrayal. He didn't understand why Germany had given up. He didn't see the hunger, poverty, and suffering back home. From his hospital bed, he believed Germany had been stabbed in the back, not defeated by enemies, but betrayed from within. This belief became the foundation of his hatred. He started to think that it was the fault of certain groups, especially Jews, communists, and politicians, who he believed had weakened Germany from the inside. These were dangerous and false ideas, but to him, they felt like truth. After the war, Hitler returned to a Germany that was broken. The economy was falling apart. Money had little value. Many people had no jobs or homes. Angry protests filled the streets. The once great nation seemed weak and humiliated. Adolf didn't know what to do with his life, but he still had his voice. One day, in 1919, he attended a small meeting of a political group called the German Workers' Party. He wasn't expecting much. But when someone stood up and spoke against the nation, Hitler couldn't stay silent. He stood up and delivered a fiery speech in defense of Germany. His words were sharp, his voice filled with passion. The leaders of the group were impressed. They invited him to join. This was the moment everything changed. Hitler discovered he had a gift. He could speak in a way that moved people. He wasn't just loud, he was intense. He could make people feel angry, proud, and even hopeful all at once. His speeches made people believe that Germany could rise again and that they were not to blame for the country's suffering. Instead, he told them, "You are not weak, you were betrayed, and I will help you take back your honor." When Adolf Hitler joined the German Workers' Party in 1919, it was just a tiny group with a handful of members. They met in small beer halls in Munich, talking about how Germany had been wronged and how they needed to bring back the country's strength. At first, few people paid attention, but that quickly changed because of Hitler. His speeches were not just loud, they were powerful. He didn't read from paper. He spoke from emotion, from his anger, his beliefs, and his deep desire to rise above the pain of his past. He told the people exactly what they wanted to hear, that Germany could be great again, that they had been betrayed by weak leaders, and that enemies were secretly working against them. People listened. People cheered. By 1920, the party changed its name to something longer: the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party for short. The word socialist attracted working people. The word national brought in proud patriots. But behind the name was something far more dangerous: a plan built on lies, racism, and hate. Hitler designed a new symbol for the party: a red flag with a white circle and a black swastika in the middle. It was bold, easy to remember, and soon it was everywhere. The Nazi Party began printing posters, handing out flyers, and holding huge rallies. They promised to fix the economy, restore order, and bring back national pride. But behind the smiles and promises, there was something darker.
Hitler blamed the Jews for Germany's problems.
Even though they were only a small part of the population and had nothing to do with the war or the economy. He also blamed communists, the mentally ill, and anyone who looked or believed differently. He believed in a false idea that Germans were a pure race and others were inferior. In 1923, he decided to take things by force. Along with other Nazi members, Hitler tried to overthrow the German government in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He marched into a Munich beer hall, fired a pistol into the ceiling, and shouted that the revolution had begun. But it failed. The police came, shots were fired, people died. Hitler was arrested and sent to prison. At first, it seemed like the end of his movement, but prison gave him something else: time. While behind bars, Hitler wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. In the book, he wrote about his beliefs, his hatred for Jews, his love for Germany, and his dream of creating a strong nation ruled by one leader: himself. The book sold many copies. His ideas began to spread. When he was released from prison, after only 9 months, he returned to a changed world. The Nazi Party had lost power during his time in jail. But Germany was still in trouble. The economy was worse than ever. People were desperate. They didn't care who fixed their problems. They just wanted food, work, and safety. Hitler now had a new plan. Instead of using violence to take over the government, he would use democracy. He would win elections. He would climb into power legally, and once he was in control, he would never let go. Throughout the late 1920s, the Nazi Party began to grow. They used posters, music, uniforms, and speeches to attract people, especially the youth. Young people wore Nazi armbands. They sang songs about a new Germany. They believed they were part of something historic. And in 1929, something happened that gave Hitler the chance he had been waiting for. In 1929, the world changed again. A huge economic crisis known as the Great Depression began in the United States and quickly spread across the globe. Businesses failed, banks closed, and millions of people lost their jobs. Germany, already struggling after World War I, was hit very hard. Factories shut down. Families couldn't afford food or coal for heat. Children went hungry. People stood in long lines for bread. Many Germans felt hopeless. They didn't trust their leaders anymore. They were tired of weak governments and broken promises. This was the moment Adolf Hitler had been waiting for. He and the Nazi Party promised strong leadership and quick solutions. They blamed outsiders, especially Jews and communists, for the country's suffering. They said Germany needed a new direction, a single leader who could save the nation. People were desperate. They listened. In 1930, the Nazi Party won more seats in the German parliament, called the Reichstag. By 1932, they had become one of the largest parties in the country. Hitler ran for president against the war hero Paul von Hindenburg. He lost the election, but not by much. His power and popularity kept growing. Many in the government still didn't trust Hitler. They thought he was too extreme, but others believed they could control him. They thought giving him some power might calm the Nazis down. So on January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, the head of the government. At first, some Germans were unsure, but many were excited. Hitler gave powerful speeches full of pride and promise. He told people they would work again. He said he would rebuild the army. He promised to make Germany respected and feared again. But very quickly, things began to change. Just weeks after Hitler became chancellor, a fire broke out in the Reichstag building. It was a terrible event, and many believe the Nazis used it as an excuse to take more control. They claimed that Germany was under attack from communists and used fear to pass new laws. These new laws gave Hitler the power to arrest enemies, silence the press, and ban other political parties. Soon, the democracy that had allowed Hitler to rise was gone. Germany had become a dictatorship, a country ruled by one man with no free speech, no free press, and no more elections. Hitler called this new government the Third Reich. He said it would last 1,000 years. He ordered the building of roads, highways, and weapons factories. He created jobs. He made the German people feel proud again, but at a terrible cost. He replaced freedom with fear. People who spoke out against the Nazis disappeared. Books were burned. Children were taught to worship Hitler as a hero. And in quiet corners of cities and villages, something even more frightening began: the open persecution of the Jewish people. Jewish businesses were boycotted. Jewish doctors and teachers were fired. New laws were passed saying that Jews were not real citizens. Families who had lived in Germany for generations were treated like enemies. Hitler was not hiding his plans. He had written them years before in his book. Now he was putting them into action. By the late 1930s, Adolf Hitler had full control over Germany. The people cheered for him, the army followed him, and those who feared him stayed silent. But Hitler was not finished. He wanted more than just power inside Germany. He wanted to control other countries too. He believed that Germans were a superior race and that they needed more space to live and grow. In 1938, Hitler took over Austria without a single battle. Soon after, he took part of Czechoslovakia. Other countries watched nervously but did not stop him. They hoped he would stop on his own. But Hitler did not stop. On September 1st, 1939, he ordered the German army to invade Poland. This was the beginning of World War II. In response, Britain and France declared war on Germany. Soon, the world was at war again. German forces moved quickly, taking over much of Europe. Hitler's army seemed unstoppable. But behind the battlefields, something even worse was happening. Hitler and the Nazis began carrying out a dark and deadly plan to remove all Jewish people from Europe. First, Jews were forced to wear yellow stars, move into crowded ghettos, and leave their homes and jobs. Then they were taken to concentration camps. In these camps, millions of Jews, along with Roma people, disabled individuals, political prisoners, and others, were starved, beaten, and murdered. This terrible event is called the Holocaust. Over 6 million Jews were killed. The world had never seen such cruelty. By 1945, Germany was losing the war. Cities were bombed, soldiers were defeated, and the truth about the death camps was being discovered. Hitler hid in a bunker under the city of Berlin. On April 30th, 1945, with enemies surrounding the city, he took his own life. The war in Europe ended shortly after. When World War II ended in 1945, the world was left in shock. Over 60 million people had died. Cities were destroyed. Families were broken. The truth about the Holocaust brought tears and horror to people everywhere. No one could believe that such evil had been allowed to grow. Germany was defeated. Hitler was gone. The Nazi Party was banned. Many Nazi leaders were arrested and put on trial in a court called the Nuremberg Trials. Some were sent to prison. Others were sentenced to death for their crimes. But the pain remained. Survivors of the Holocaust had lost everything: their homes, their families, and their peace. Some tried to rebuild. Others left Europe to start new lives in safer places. The world had learned a hard lesson. We saw how dangerous one man's hate could become if people stayed silent. We learned that freedom, truth, and kindness must always be protected. Schools began to teach the story of Hitler and the war so that young people would never forget. Even today, we still talk about Adolf Hitler, not to praise him, but to remember the past and prevent it from happening again. The lesson is clear. Hate leads to destruction. Silence allows evil to grow. But love, courage, and respect can build a better future. Let us choose peace. Let us stand up for what is right, and let us never forget.